that they're traveling.
Resolve the regime flow issues.
That's good. Yeah.
And we're saying we need to get out of the agreement, and they
Good.
understand that, but they want to know how we're going to work together.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. We'll call the meeting of the Bureau of Public Works to order. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to address the committee? Please come up and state your name and address for the record.
Good afternoon. My name is Elizabeth Bryden, and I'm from 120 Sunny Beach Drive in West Hartford, and I'm an MDC customer. Thank you very much for allowing me the opportunity to comment on agenda item number 9 today.
You break it, you pay for it.
That won't be good. How about that? As long as it works, I won't touch it. Okay. Okay, thank you. All right, thank you for allowing me the opportunity to comment on agenda item number 9 regarding retroactive reimbursement for customer sewer repairs. Having shared my comments on a number of occasions already dating back to April 2023, I will try to summarize the key points today supporting the retroactive reimbursement for customer sewer repairs, particularly as it relates using my unique situation. To illustrate my point, I'd like to briefly recap the issue I have with my home. In January 2023, we had a sewage backup into our home called the MDC emergency line. They came out that night and explained the process to follow and also gave us the recommended contractors for repair. We arranged for an MDC-approved contractor to come out and assess the situation. We learned through the contractor and the MDC staff who came on site during the process that our sewer line did not go to the street as many do, but it actually went down the hill behind our house, off our property, onto our neighbor's property, and into the woods behind their house before connecting to the main sewer line. A camera determined that the line on our property was clear and that the main issue was some tree roots in the pipe in the woods behind my neighbor's home. As a result of the backup, we were not able to remain in our home for over a week. Our basement required significant repair and our lawn was destroyed in several big areas due to the trucks and stones needed to fix the situation. Ultimately, a pipe had to be repaired in the woods, replaced in the woods on my neighbor's property, and it cost us $12,283. It's important to note that due to the way the sewer pipe was structured, we had absolutely no access as homeowners to this pipe for maintenance or repair, nor was any agreement in place. However, we were held responsible for pipes that are on someone else's property and to which we had no access or authority over. In late 2023, I know the new sewer ordinances were approved. These revised ordinances offer some relief to homeowners should they need to make repairs to the sewer laterals on their own private property. However, they do not currently address the issue of retroactivity and potential reimbursement for repairs that have already been made out of necessity. My unique situation is one that, unfortunately, has not been addressed by the revised ordinances. Had the sewage backup in our house happened just a few months later, it likely would have been covered. In addition, related to the issue is the new fund announced by the governor in June 2023. As you know, the new Hartford Sewage System Repair and Improvement Fund helps homeowners in North Hartford who have been impacted by sewage issues, which is great. As I understand it, this program allows homeowners who have been impacted by damage on or after January 1, 2021, to apply for reimbursement. It's not clear to me why this program allows for reimbursement for some NDC customers and the Sewer House Connection Program does not. Given that this new fund for Hartford residences allow for retroactive reimbursement, I believe the new Sewer House Connection Program should also allow for retroactivity to help other MDC customers who have been affected by costly sewer issues and repairs. I would like to again respectfully request that retroactive reimbursement be allowed within the Sewer House Connection Program, perhaps for the same time period as the program for homeowners in Hartford, or at a minimum, some language be added that allows for some retroactive reimbursement for unique situations like my own. I appreciate the opportunity to share my thoughts today and hope you take them into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else that would like to address the committee? Hearing and seeing none, we'll move on to item 3 of the agenda, the election of chairperson. Is there a motion?
You look for nominations?
Yes, I'm looking for nominations. I'm sorry.
I'd like to nominate Commissioner Hoffman to be chairperson again. Just did a great job and he should do it again.
Second.
Are there any other nominations? Hearing none, nominations will be closed. All in favor of electing Al Hoffman as chairman of this committee, please say aye.
Aye.
And opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. Congratulations, Al.
Thank you.
You can have the chair back.
Yeah. At this point, thank you, everybody, for showing your support. Appreciate that. At this point, we have to have our election for vice chair. Mr. Taylor.
Yes, I'd
Commissioner
like
Taylor.
to place a nomination of Cal Torres as Vice Chair, Public Works Committee. He has had a long distinguished career in public service, has joined the commission in the last, 3 years, 4 years? 4 years. And I think that he brings a breadth of experience and temperament that would serve us well.
And do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you.
Second.
All in favor of Cal Torres as our vice chair?
Aye.
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 Thank you. Any opposition? All right, so moved. Thank you. Congratulations. Welcome aboard again. All right. At this point, we will approve our minutes from November 8th meeting and ask for a motion to do so.
Move adoption.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
I don't know who that was.
That was Commissioner Magnan.
Magnan, okay. Commissioner Magnan. And any abstentions?
Abstention, Mr. Chair.
One?
Two.
Two?
Three.
Three. Okay, I'm assuming that's absent, so.
Yes.
Sounds like it passed. Enough votes to pass that, so we'll move on. Thank you. We're on now item number 6. Item number 6, if I can call upon our counsel first to determine whether or not we would have to have an executive session for this.
It's the lease.
The lease, I'm sorry. Fuel cell lease.
Yes, thank you, Chris Stone, District Council. This does involve a proposed lease of real estate. It's not, the details are set forth in the resolution, which I think has been distributed, John?
We have it.
We have it, okay, we'll
I can
distribute the
distribute it.
resolution.
You ready to see that?
Yeah, it's not something that's gonna be subject to a public solicitation, so you don't have to have an executive session on it.
Okay, very good.
And this is the start of a process that will ultimately end up subject to what you do tonight with the district board, so.
So we are looking, though, if I'm correct, to consider and take appropriate
Or some
action.
action, that's correct.
So at this point, I don't know if, Chris, you want to address?
Well, I can
Issue or
start, yeah,
Scott?
I can start, and then
Okay.
I'll hand it over to Ms. Jellison. As John's passing out the proposed resolution, Scott was approached by someone who was interested in leasing a portion of property that we own down in South Meadows, which is the Hartford Water Pollution Control Facility, 240 Brainerd Road. And it's a small portion of that, somewhere around 32,000 square feet, which is less than an acre. Apparently, there is space out there to accommodate this particular end user. And it basically involves a lease of the property for purposes of a fuel cell modest facility that would bring to the MDC revenues as outlined in the resolution of years 1 through 5, approximately $350,000 per year, 6 through 10, $367,000, $385,000 for years 11 through 15, and years 16 to 20, $405,000. There'd also be an escalator for cost of living, or a minimum of 5%, whichever is greater. So it's an opportunity that was presented to Mr. Jellison unsolicited. There is space out there to accommodate this particular end user. And with that, I'll turn it over to Scott. If you have anything you want to add to that in terms of your conversations with the potential tenant, then please offer those and answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Scott Jellison, CEO. So we do have a, can you put the slide up, Julie? So Michael Palmer, who's here, in the audience, if you don't mind, can Michael?
please.
Michael, can you come sit up at the chair, one of the chairs here? Michael approached the MDC, myself, and as you know, we talked about all these different energy programs that we've engaged with and benefited from, like solar, and they're really driven by the legislator mandating that the power utilities develop green infrastructure within their portfolio. So that's what we did at Pequannock. We built two acres of solar, and we benefited from that program issued by the state, controlled through PURA, regulated through PURA to the utilities. So Michael came to us saying they have a project to put 8.5 megawatts of power, specifically fuel cell power, onto the grid for the same purposes, but with Eversource. The challenge is that they were planning to build this site on Homestead Avenue and realized that Homestead Avenue doesn't have enough gas capacity to actually generate 8.5 megawatts of power. So understanding our needs and our infrastructure down at the plant, the question was, do you have, MDC, do you have enough capacity of gas available so that we could build this plant on your site, less than an acre? We'd pay you up to $300,000 a year for lease. The fuel cell piece has nothing to do with the MDC. We're not a part of that agreement. We're not getting the power from this 8.5 megawatts. It's simply they need a space that they can build 8.5 megawatts of power. They need enough gas capacity to do that. And we are situated such that the infrastructure in front of our facility can handle that. We verified the issues with the gas company. Yes, there's enough capacity. And then the question really becomes, and similar to what we did with the solar, and I'll let Michael explain the process he has to go through. But from my understanding, talking with Michael, is PURA wants to see that they have a lease agreement with somebody to put this in a site that has enough capacity, gas capacity. So what we're asking is to enter into not a lease, but enter into an MOU that would allow us to negotiate a lease if this project was approved through PURA. So there's a lot of ifs, right? We don't know if this project will actually move forward, but we need to engage with Fuel Cell Energy with an MOU that they can bring to PURA. So that's really as simple as it is. We really just kind of summarized here the location. We already talked about the potential revenue here. They said basically we did provide everybody with what we were provided, which is a hard copy of their fuel cell project, and this was what they submitted to PURA a while ago as related to the project. So we're not going to get into that. We're happy to answer any questions. Michael can answer any questions. But this area here on the map, if everyone remembers, the icon there on the building is 231 Brainerd, and that's our facility where our engineers are housed. We have construction activity. It's quite a large space, 75,000 square feet. This area, the dirt area, is where our construction trailers are, our laydown areas. So a portion of that, which was closest to the road, would be where this facility would be built. And it's really that simple. So I'd like to defer there. If you'd like to ask Mr. Palmer any questions, or me any questions, I'm happy to try and answer them.
Certainly, thank you. Mr. Palmer,
Yes, sir.
would you like to make some presentation?
Not really necessary. I mean, Mr. Jellison basically put it all into a nutshell. This project, as he mentioned, was a incentive-based project with the state to meet RPS standards. That was given to us, about 2 years ago. It was identified to go on a property in Homestead Avenue. We determined that that property wasn't good, so we were looking for a new home for this project. That's basically how this all started. In doing that research with the Connecticut Natural Gas and the pipelines and what's available and that type of thing, we determined that one of the best areas in Hartford, because this had to remain in Hartford, was the MDC's property. That's when I approached Mr. Jellison with the idea of us leasing some property space. And as he mentioned, we don't need a full lease right at this moment. What we do need is basically an option to lease agreement so that we can go to the boards that control the incentive and state, we have a new site, we'd like to move it. And they can also say right then and there not to move it. They could say, okay. They could say, okay, with some kind of caveats. But the only way to move this is we need to have that site control proof to them. And an option to lease of the site is enough for them to be okay with, to ask that question. So that sums it up.
Oh, it might be 240, you know what I mean? It might be a.
It's Tom's place.
Thank you, Mr. Palmer.
Sure.
Commissioners, opportunity for questions. Start with Commissioner Torres.
Yeah, are there any environmental concerns that we should be aware of with this new facility?
Scott Schultz, I'm going to let Mike answer this, and it's an interesting answer, but as Mike, as to the emissions of a fuel cell, how does this rank within the program of PURA and the state in terms of emissions as a fuel cell?
Right, yeah. Within the state, the fuel cell is considered a Class 1 renewable, and that's why it is part of the RPS standards. So even though on natural gas, it does have a slight emission of just CO2, it does not have any NOx, SOx, or particulates, none of those things. It is still considered under the state's rules that it is a Class 1 and meets the RPS standards. You know, it can be eventually retrofitted because that's part of the agreement of bidding into these things, that the equipment can be retrofitted in the future for some sort of zero emissions or carbon capture. It can do that as well. So in the future, it could be set up for that if need be.
Oh, another question.
Please.
If partially that property would be used for that activity, what happens then to the equipment that's on there that we store for our purposes? Will it still be used efficiently for that?
If I may,
Yes,
Mr. Chair.
please.
Yes, Scott Olson. So Tom Tyler's here. He runs the facility. You want to just talk about this location and how it would impact your operations in the future?
Good afternoon. Tom Tyler, Director of Facilities. So the picture that you see on the screen is a little dated. Right now, it is really a construction trailer area and some limited laydown during the tunnel pump station. The equipment that we have stored on the paved area, that's moved locations a couple times over the year, so we're not concerned about that area, although that is not included or would be impacted by this. So, you know, I generally drew the little red circle around that area, but the actual square footage is smaller than what is shown within side of that red line. But right now, it is just a construction trailer and some limited laydown. When the tunnel pump station is complete, it would just be an open area, whether we would store equipment there or not. So there's no defined future purpose for that as in another structure or part of the treatment facility. So the area would be open.
One last question.
Yes, please.
this would be what potentially a revenue-producing activity. And given the relationships that we have, I mean, as a municipality that doesn't pay taxes, does this accrue any benefit to the city in terms of potential revenue for tax purposes, as it is property that is going to be producing revenue for other entities? I mean, it's a legal question, but
Not as our charter reads right now, no.
they won't.
Any property we own within the city of Hartford, within any member town of the MDC is exempt.
If-
But this equipment.
But this
will be
is, but
taxed.
this is,
Well, the equipment may be, but we don't own the equipment. It would be
Right.
taxed to the,
They will be taxed.
It'll be
it would be
taxed.
taxed to, or by the city to the owner.
It could be exempt by the federal,
If I-
the state.
If I may finish, to the owner for equipment, but as to the real estate,
oh, no, I understand the real estate, but I'm talking about the actual revenue.
Yeah, so if I may, Scott Jellison, Mike, are you aware, I would assume, and I don't know this, but for example, when we built the tunnel machine is taxed by the city of Hartford, right? It's a piece of equipment. It's like a computer, it's your desk in your building. So I'm assuming that you guys are gonna be paying taxes to the town that you live in, whatever town that is?
Yeah, typically with these projects, and again, it depends on the details of that specific incentive. But for the most part, we pay the taxes because we own the equipment. We're entering into just a lease of the site and just be able to put the equipment on the ground there. We pay taxes on any equipment, any production, anything that goes on around it, we typically pay the tax for.
we don't pay tax on the revenue generated from that.
Right.
But on the land itself.
It's an offset on ad valorem costs for
Right.
all 8 of our member towns.
Thank you.
Is there a tax on the land? I guess that's.
No.
There isn't.
No, Scott Jellison.
Because it's our land.
Right, it's our land, we're not taxed, we're just leasing, but I would bet to guess that the equipment that Fuel Cell Energy is going to operate, if they were to operate, will have to pay taxes to the city of Hartford for that equipment, whatever that equipment is.
So it's similar to a contractor that's doing work for us.
Identical.
They have to pay taxes to the city of Hartford when they bring equipment on the site. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Only on a
Yes,
more,
More permanent basis.
I guess something that probably has to be researched a little bit further. My understanding is that when you have a not-for-profit situation, that portion of the nonprofit that actually generates income aside from what it normally does. In other words, we have nothing to do with them other than leasing property to them. That portion typically is taxed. And so that's my question, probably something that needs to be looked at because, we do have a lot of acreage and, and property in the city which it's not taxable. And so it becomes an issue, as we try to develop the city and provide for, some lessening of that burden, okay, for taxpayers.
Through you, Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
we will answer that question for you.
Is this gonna have to go to the Board of Finance?
It's up to what we're asking, BPW to do is to, pass a resolution, pass a resolution that would go to the full board. If the board so chooses to send it to finance, that's up.
It's not an expenditure item, it's a revenue item, so probably not.
Well, revenue item
that's
or an expenditure is the Board of Finance's responsibility, whether it's a revenue or a.
Well, you can do with it what you want,
Expense.
you can do with it what you want, but it doesn't have to go to Board of
But
Finance.
it just allows, excuse me, it just allows them to move forward so that they can
Right.
try to be considered
That's what I
down the
meant to
road.
say.
So there is no issue really right now, other than allowing them to be able to pursue this. Okay.
We just saw this tonight.
Yes, sir. Commissioner Patel, please.
Did we discuss anything about?
sorry, Commissioner, could you turn your mic on?
Potential conflict with our facility there, whatever structure they put in.
Yes, if I may, Mr. Chairman, Scott Jellison. Yes, we did. I met with Michael and Tom and Chris to actually look at where we could put a 1 acre, 3/4 of an acre facility that would meet their needs and not impact our operation, and that's why we picked this area. Just to, Tom mentioned this, but, you know, that's a big red circle, but that's not 3/4 of an acre. You know, as you can imagine, the building, the white building is 75,000 square feet, right? So it's much smaller, and it'd be up against the roadway. So it's a much smaller footprint than that red circle on the map.
Any environmental impact, now or future, after use or before use?
Yeah, so as Michael said, the state of Connecticut and PURA have determined that fuel cells are clean energy, and they meet the criteria of the ZREC program. They meet the criteria of zero emissions. And so, you know, that's a state mandate through DEEP and through PURA. So right, they are identified as, fuel cells are identified as renewables, so therefore, they meet the criteria.
You said that they will not need as much space, but do they have a right to sublease whatever they don't use? Do they have an intention to sublease it?
Yeah, typically, just, I can answer this, Mike Palmer from Fuel Cell. Typically, in the past, in other projects similar to this, and the most recent one being the Derby project, if you look online in the news, you'll see there's a 15 megawatt system down there that's under a very similar situation as this one is, from a standpoint of supporting the state and the RPS standards. This one is half that size, but on that one, I can tell you right now, the lease does not have sublease authority, none of that. We do not intend to do that because the agreements that we enter into with the state, with the utilities, the local EDCs, are for at least a 20-year system. So we have no intention of subleasing anything. We use the minimum amount of space that we need. In other words, the equipment obviously takes up space. There's a certain access around the equipment that we need for maintenance, and then we put a fence around that, and that's it.
Thank you.
Further questions?
I
Commissioner Drake.
know we're only approving you to put together a lease or some type of an agreement, but I just want to make sure that you have something at the end of the lease that everything's removed. Some type of agreement. Okay. And other than that, I can't think of, is there any reason why we don't want to do this? Because you've been paying attention. I can't think of, I don't know why we wouldn't, but is there a reason that we sit here and go, we don't want to do this?
Scott Jellison, I don't see any reason why, if it was going to impact our operations and our future expansion of any sort, I would say there's no sense in taking that risk. But for the small footprint that they're going to be utilizing, Mike has indicated the largest vehicle that will enter this facility will be a pickup truck. You know,
There's nothing that you could think
it's
of.
nothing. You know, and for us to get $300,000 to $400,000 a year in a lease to do nothing, we don't have. We're not part of this
But you
fuel
don't have
cell.
to cut, you don't have to cut the grass anymore, it's like you're not doing it.
No. So it makes a lot of sense. So that's, yeah, I would suggest it's a great deal for us if the project gets approved. I mean, it's not necessary that it will, but this is the first step for.
This is what, 40-year lease?
Yes, Commissioner Taylor. I'm sorry, Commissioner.
No, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I just have one question. With regard to gas availability, have we given any thought to the impact that this project may or may not have in terms of the availability of natural gas in that area, particularly with regard to any projects, future or otherwise, that we may need to have natural gas?
Yes, Mr. Chu, through you. So we asked that very question of CNG, and our answer back from CNG, they had already dealt with this issue on this project on Homestead Avenue, so they were familiar with it. But they said, yes, we have plenty of capacity within their infrastructure in the street to serve both ourselves and this project.
Further? Yes.
Sorry.
Commissioner Bizzano.
Thank you. So it looks like we're getting into the real estate business. Is this something that we've done in the past? With leasing, leasing MDC property?
Well, we have, Chris Stone, District Council, if I may, just off the top of my head, we have leases with certain cell tower companies on MDC property throughout the district. So I guess the short answer to your question is yes, we've done this where we have excess land and it's available and it has some, it's a revenue source. Yes, we've explored these. So it's happened before.
The Tunxus Club.
Tunxus Club in Massachusetts, but the more recent one are the cell towers.
It was 100 years, wasn't it?
That goes back a ways.
One other question, Mr. Chairman.
Yes,
So,
please.
So there's going to, I'm just trying to make myself clear. There's going to be a facility built on this property, correct?
Yes,
A
Scott.
facility of some sort, whatever square footage, you said 2,000 square feet or so? Or more?
Yes.
And the facility is going to be owned by who?
Fuel Cell Energy.
The tenant.
It's a
The
lease.
facility will be owned by the tenant, the building itself.
Building itself.
Yeah.
So then why wouldn't they pay taxes to the
I
city?
didn't say they would.
Right.
On the
No,
building
not
and
just
equip-
on-
building and equipment, not the
Building
land.
and equipment, okay,
Yeah.
not just personal property, but real estate taxes as well.
Building equipment, not the land.
Okay, misunderstood then, all right.
That's my fault if I wasn't clear.
Okay, thank you.
Just a quick comment to that. There is no building associated with this thing.
No building, now I'm really confused.
We provided, if I may, Scott Jelson, we provided a copy of their proposal that they sent to Pura on Homestead Avenue, and I think everybody should have a copy of that, right? Does everybody have a copy of
I
that?
don't have one.
Okay.
Okay. Mike, explain what's on the property.
Yeah, Mike, if you could just explain what does it look like? Physically, what does it look like?
The units that are there are called carbonate technology units, because they're molten carbonate fuel cells. What they look like, the easiest way to explain this is there's a couple of separate sections or skids that go with it of equipment, and then it's all interconnected through cabling and piping. The primary sections are what are called the modules. Modules are a giant box, literally, that's about 15-foot cube, big box. Those are fed by a skid, which is about maybe 15 feet long by about 8 feet wide with some equipment for fuel processing when the fuel comes in to go into that. Then there's an exhaust section, which has the exhaust that comes out, and the exhaust that comes out is primarily heat, hot air. That section is, I think it's roughly on these, it depends on the grade, but usually about 15 to 19 feet high, max. About maybe an 8-foot square space, and it goes straight up. Around that, some of the other equipment, you'll have some electrical gear because a fuel cell produces a DC current, it needs to be AC to be usable. So there's some electrical equipment that goes on there. That electrical equipment is basically a pad with several boxes, as you see in most electrical equipment around industrial areas. They're fairly small. They're only about 4 feet high, maybe 6 feet high for the controller cabinets, maybe about a section about 10, 15 feet long. And then there's a water treatment facility because the water that's used in the unit itself has to be purified to a certain extent. That comes as a prepackaged system. Again, looks like maybe a 15-foot by 8-foot little container. That's what it'll look like. Other than that, that's about all the equipment. All this equipment's laid out in an arrangement to fit in the space that we have, whatever that space may be. Most of the locations that we have in this state, and we have quite a few, they're all slightly differently arranged based on that specific site. This one's nice because it's a blank slate, so it's easy to lay it all out. We have these units at places like Trinity College, Central Connecticut State College, down in Bridgeport. There's a University of Bridgeport. There's also 2 of the largest fuel cell parks, if you guys have ever seen them or can look them up, in the world that are in this state. They're both about 15 megawatts, one being Derby and one being in Bridgeport. So you can get a good idea, and that's, verbally describing it is difficult, but that's kind of what it looks like in that sense.
Thank you. And Attorney Stone.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just,
I see, but-
Chris Stone, District Council, just for clarification. I refer to them as buildings. They're structures. They are temporary structures,
Yeah.
correct? They are removable from the site.
Yes, they are.
They are in your other facilities, whether it be at Trinity or Central or at state colleges, they're taxed by the municipality in which they're located.
Yes, they are.
And at the end of the lease, they can be removed without disrupting the integrity, for lack of a better term, of the property itself. Is that
Yes.
correct?
On all the leases that we have, at the end of the lease, there's all, the exact wording is slightly different in each one, but the intent is that we will remove it and the site will be returned to original state.
Thank you, thank you.
Yes, I see you. If I may ask you a question as well. Can you provide us, if requested, data specifically to Bridgeport, Derby, and I think you mentioned another location, nevertheless, some data that shows the productivity of this situation that you're proposing?
When you say productivity, you mean just output, electrical
Yeah,
output?
that we have something to actually see.
Okay. I can give you more data about the specific sites, more data about the project itself, this project specifically. The output goes directly to the grid. That's part of this project, right? It is a grid support project, meaning that we have a firm agreement with the utilities based on an incentive package for a tariff that they pay us a certain amount for power. And that's what we're going to be doing, is putting the power out there. The power would not be available for anything else. That agreement's already in place. So, if we produce less, we get paid less. If we produce the max, we get paid the max. That's the way these agreements typically work.
Go ahead,
Thank
Attorney
you,
Stone.
Chris Stone. Do you need either siting commission approval or deep approval for this facility?
Yeah, that's all part of the process. To get back to what we're asking for, we need a option to lease. We don't need a formal lease right now.
I understand that.
Just an optional lease, to be able to take it to the utilities. This project specifically has both Eversource and UI involved. They split the fee for this 80-20 because it's a large enough project, and it was under the incentive where the utilities or the EDCs were being asked to provide more fuel cell type class 1 generation on the grid.
You need a permit from DEEP to do what you want to do.
We need to get approval from DEEP to move the project.
You need approval from the siting council to do what you want to do.
We had that at Homestead, so I'm going to assume that we probably will at this site too.
And those will all be a condition on.
Of course,
Okay.
of course.
Oh, I understand.
I have three commissioners with their hands up over here. So Commissioner Taylor being closest to me, I'm going to go there, and then Commissioner Van Dyke, and then Commissioner Bush. And I don't know about this side, but I'll get you all. Commissioner Taylor.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I guess one of my other concerns here, and I'm sure that can be taken care of, is what change, if any, does this have or impact with regard to insurance? Does it change our risks with regards to having that facility located there? And is that something then that we have to be concerned about in changes in our insurance premiums? And are we basically going to be protected or indemnified or what have you? I'd leave that to the staff and to counsel's office, but I think that the insurance issue is something that we should be concerned about and careful about.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Scott Jolson. We'll answer that question. I think this would be similar to our issues with the lease tower, the tower leases and those kinds of
Chris
things.
Stone, what Commissioner Taylor brings out is two important issues, indemnification and additional costs because of any additional insurance requirements. Whether we agree or not tonight, those would be obligations or costs that we passed on to the lessee.
So Julie's just passing out a little homestead. This is the homestead project, and if you look at the pictures, you can see roughly. And Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is typical of what you'd expect to see, right, on our site, in terms of the size and the the equipment itself, is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct. I believe on the second page, the one that has the two pictures, the one that's on top is the actual rendering for, yeah, the one that's on top is the rendering for the Homestead site. So you can see how there's 3 units lined up next to each other. There was a space left for a 4th unit that was eventually going to be there. That's why we had that whole space laid out there. We can do, that would be up to roughly 32,000 square feet required for that. We can do less, we can do more. Part of the intent would be in the future, if the MDC needs additional generation, they would have space to add something like a fuel cell right there, and the infrastructure is already in place, but that's for future.
So just to clarify again, Scott Chelsea, if everybody has this slide, this top picture is basically what they're proposing on our site, right?
Correct.
And that is less than an acre, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So an acre, as we know, is 202 by 202, so roughly that size of a space.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Van Dyke.
Commissioner Van Dyke. I think this is a wonderful project for MDC, and I see no reason why we should not approve this, especially with some of the safeguards that were mentioned tonight that General Counsel seems to be already working on. As an urban design, person who works in urban design and urban planning, this is a much better site over in an industrial site rather than on Homestead Avenue that could be potentially developed in the future. So I think this is a good thing for us to partner on something like this, and I think this is very good for the city of Hartford to put this into an industrial site rather than over there where we have a lot of people living and a lot of homes, et cetera. So I think this is great for us, and I would encourage us to approve this and move forward.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Commissioner. Commissioner Bush.
In the amount of time, thank you for recognizing me, Mr. Chairman. In the amount of time it took to get to me, I was able to read the literature and answer my own question. But I'll verbalize it anyway, just for the heck of it. My question was going to be, has it been considered to add an additional capacity so the MDC could benefit directly from the generation of electricity on our site? And clearly, a 4th unit generating 2.4 megawatts would be a huge benefit to the MDC, produced directly on our site as a generating facility. So it sounds like a great idea to me.
Yeah, it's
Thank you.
the grid though, that's not for us.
Thank you.
7 megawatts.
That's 7.4.
Further questions? If I've missed you raising your hand, okay. Yeah.
Commissioner Gale.
Oh, I'm sorry. Commissioner Gale, excuse me.
Thanks. Excuse my somewhat cold voice here. Just a question on the connection of the gas line to the facility. How's it coming into the facility, and is that going to interfere with, or where does it come in, and what does it do to connect? And then how do you get the power out? What's the connection off your facility? Where's that going, and over what part of our property is that going?
Well, the gas line I know of, this is Mike Palmer, Fuel Cell Energy. The gas line I know is right out at the road. So we would take the shortest direct route from that to the site itself. That's typical, and we go direct to the gas company. The power line's the same thing. We would try to get the shortest direct route out to the grid level. This comes off, power on this type of unit would come off at about a 13.8 volt, which is transmission level. If there's a transmission line close by, we'll run it to that. If not, we'll run it to the closest one that can handle that amount of power. It depends on the EDC, because we have to, whenever we do these, we have to go to the local utility, do an interconnection study. They will then suggest where it goes. Most of the time, as I mentioned, these systems are at a 13.8 volts, so that's transmission level. They will go to the closest one there. That's what they would recommend. And we usually follow what the EDC recommends.
I don't know what that means in terms of whether this is one wire or a little tower or anything like that, but I'll just look to the MDC here to say, is this something that's a concern to us as to how they get this electricity off the site?
And thank you, Ms. Scott Johnson. So, Commissioner, as Mike identified, it's their financial obligation to get the power to wherever they need to get it to, and whatever the expense is. They would be going directly to the street. If they have to bring a transmission line down Brainerd all the way to some location to connect to some point where they could do that, that'd be at their expense. But they wouldn't be running any power through our site except for that square footage that we lease them to the street.
Thanks.
And just to add for clarification, most of the utilities, being both the power and the gas, we typically run those underground.
Oh.
Yeah.
So that's typical. And again, that all depends on the EDC, the electric utilities recommendations, but more often than not, they recommend running them underground.
Thank you.
Better, thank you.
I'm sorry. You still have the floor, Commissioner Gale.
Good.
Good, okay. Commissioner Torres.
I just think that it seems to be a well-rounded project. I think it would be beneficial to the MDC. And I think this resolution simply allows for a continuation of the process. There are a lot of details that have been brought up that would be addressed by Corporation Counsel and our own MDC folks. And I would respectfully ask that we move this resolution forward in a positive, an affirmative way.
I'll second that.
Thank you. I see you, Commissioner Patel. I don't know if that constitutes the motion that we vote on yet, but let me go to Commissioner Patel and then figure it out.
City site plan approval.
Say it again?
City site plan approval process. Does it have to go through them? That's the question one. And I agree with one of the commissioners mentioned that location wise, if it has to go through site plan approval from the city, this is ideal location.
Is that?
Commissioner, Scott Jellison again, I would bet that the city of Hartford is going to have a part in this approval process, absolutely. And I'm sure they would have done it at Homestead Avenue as well. So yes, we expect the city of Hartford to be part of this.
So, just to clarify what I mumbled about before, yes, I wasn't trying to dismiss what you were suggesting. I wanted to be sure that it was the proper way to move it. So, please, if you will again.
Move that we approve the resolution.
It's a motion to cut off
Motion to
debate
move.
and to vote on.
Yeah. And a second to that motion, unless we have a comment.
Just one clarification. I referenced 240 Brainerd Road. That's what's referenced in the agenda memo. It's 231 Brainerd Road. And I recognize, if you look to your picture, to the right is 240 of Brainerd Road. To the left is where that red circle is, that cloud. That's 231. So it's on 231. My mistake. The memo's not accurate in that reflect, so.
It'll be correct, updated for the board.
Yeah, it's 231.
Amended? Do we
That's not in the
amend it?
resolution, so you don't have to worry, that language is not in the resolution, but I just want to make it clear to everybody, it's 231.
So, we got the motion. We need a second. I'm guessing we have a second
Second.
already 2 or 3 times. All in favor of moving this resolution forward? Say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Very good. So it passes. Thank you.
Forward to the board.
And we're moving it to the next step, which is the board.
To the board.
I'm
Yeah.
assuming you need the board approval, yes.
Okay.
And then it'll come back again once the lease is, as
Yep.
proposed, finalized.
Okay, so we can move on
Thank you.
to,
Final action.
no, right, to number 7.
Thank you, Jeff.
Number 7 has to do with a situation in Windsor at the Wilson Park. So I don't know if you have some staff to present that or not.
Mr. Curley.
Mr. Curley.
Yes, Mike Curley, Manager of Engineering. Good evening. This stems from, this is a city project, town project. And they're looking to revitalize an existing park located at the corner of Windsor Avenue and Deerfield Road. We currently have a sewer line that runs through it. It's called Decker's Brook. It's 15 to 12 inches in diameter, and it bisects that property. The work is going to be somewhat on top of it, and it's listed here. They're going to be excavating. They're also going to be filling above the sewer easement up to about 2.3 feet. They're also going to be putting in a sewer connection for a future restroom facility, which is outside the easement. They're also going to be putting up some lamp posts for some of the new sidewalks they're going to be building that are going to be various materials. But we've been working very closely with them to make sure that any type of crossing through the easement is somewhat perpendicular so that the impact is minimal. We think, therefore, a lot of the work that's listed here is fairly minor in nature and is totally feasible as long as they follow the 7 criteria that we've established here, which they've agreed to, and which typically shows up in all our encroachment agreements. So we would recommend proceeding forward if approved.
Thank you, Mr. Curley. And so this is a standard situation that we've done many times in the past. And unless there are further questions, we can probably move this along quickly, as we have some constraints on time, and we have a couple other discussion items. So with that, I would ask someone to move that motion forward.
Move it.
And a second?
Second.
And ask all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Any opposition? Hearing none, move on to the next
Thank you.
item. Thank you. Number 8. That's you.
Yes, thank you.
This is your big
Thank you,
moment.
Mr. Chairman. Scott Jellison. I'm going to ask Jason to be really quick because we're short on time. But if everybody remembers my email that I sent out on February 12th, we have to do, under the integrated plan, we've got some different restriction. We are restricted to do certain things that we never had to do before, especially communicate with the public. So we have to now do quarterly meetings, which we've never done before. So we started those. The first one was in December, right? And December 31st. The next one is due on March 14th. This presentation is on our website. We needed to put a public notice in the paper, 30 days, so everybody has a chance to review it and get comments. The difference between the last meeting, I'm sorry, it wasn't, what was the date of the last meeting?
December 14th.
December 14th. So the difference between the quarterly meeting and the annual meeting, we have to get input and give the community opportunity to have public comment. So we need that 30-day window. This is on our website. In the last quarterly meeting, we only had 2 people from the public on the WebEx. We're hoping and expecting more. We changed the time to 6 o'clock. It was 5:30, so we changed it to 6 o'clock. Jay's going to go through real quick what the update is, and if you have any questions, we will answer them. So Jay, 10 minutes.
Thank you. Jason Waterbury, Assistant Manager of Engineering. The presentation that you see here is the one that's on the website right now. It is officially listed as a draft document, pending review from both DEEP, Independent Consumer Advocate, as well as some updates that we have on our end that we're still working through. I don't intend on going through the entire presentation, more just along the lines of what key points are that slides are speaking to. So for the sake of brevity, I'm not going to go through, but this slide right here is essentially the agenda. It's the same exact agenda that was put on the website separately and that was issued separately as a separate document. The next slide is the outline of the presentation. This is the same outline that we used back in December. I guess that's one thing I do want to go back to, but I don't expect DEEP to have any real comments on the presentation, nor the ICA, or any major comments on on the presentation, since they had comments on the December one, which we addressed, and this is essentially the same format. So the purpose of this slide is really to point out North Hartford, what its definition was per EPA and DEEP, As you've probably seen numerous presentations on the integrated plan for the last 6 years. As you know, back in mid-2023, in response to comments from EPA and DEEP, we refocused and shifted projects around, focusing on North Hartford and focusing on projects that were win-win with CSO reduction and community benefit. So that's basically the intent of this slide, is to just document, and this is one that was presented back in December, and there was no major comments or questions that arose from it. The purpose of this slide, and I apologize if I'm rushing, so if there are any questions, I could stop and speak to them, but the purpose of this slide is really to put some kind of tangible definition to what we meant by community benefit. The main community benefit examples that we wanted to point out for the purposes, for the, changing gears, shall we say, with this North Hartford pilot program, was that we were focusing on lateral renewals and replacements, as well as the backwater valve and private property disconnect program, as a means to both remove I&I and also protect customers from backups, whether it was caused by sewer surcharging or defects in their actual laterals themselves. This particular slide is an exact cutout of what's required in the consent order. So the consent order specifically states those 4 items that we need to present on both quarterly and annually. It's essentially an update of what we're doing, schedule of what we're doing, and then status of minority and disadvantaged business enterprises, which Jeff King is here, and he can, in similar format, give you a brief overview of what that is. We do not, right now, as far as this presentation goes, have any other items requested by the commissioner at this time. That commissioner is the commissioner of the state, DEEP. This is really the real meat and potatoes of the presentation. It points out where projects are right now, what their current consent order deadline is, and also whether or not when we expect a project to go to bid and when we expect it to then transition to construction. Over time, you'll see the projects on here shift from gray, if they haven't been started yet, to that peachish color, which is in design, to eventually orange, which is construction, and probably a different color once we have complete. One thing that I will point out, because it does show up on another slide, is the expedited sewer separation work. The scope of those projects were expanded as new needs were identified, and whether new needs were identified, and also just to get more benefit. Result of that is more properties are protected, more CSO reduction will be achieved, but the projects will extend beyond the current consent order deadline. We had initial conversations with DEEP, actually as recently this afternoon. There are no major objections from DEEP on that. Their main concern is how that gets communicated out, and as far as the public actually knowing what's going on. This slide is another one that's straight out of the consent order. You'll see that the numbers are only partially populated this time. It is an extensive effort from our consultant's modeling team to actually calculate on a project-by-project basis what the CSO reductions are, because that's what this slide is really pointing to. We expect to have these numbers updated by the end of this month, so this slide will be fully populated in the final version of this presentation. One other consent order requirement is we have to point out any work that we're doing outside of the consent order, and really right now the majority of the work that's outside of the consent order is sewer work that's pertaining to our CMOM program or our asset management program, which is really driven by member towns paving programs. So you'll see, this slide is probably you've seen multiple times before with regards to the sewer easement work. Now I'm going to toggle through just so we can get the whole picture. When I'm doing this presentation on March 14th, I would stop at each project and give a little bit of an update. But the colored areas on the screen right here are the North Hartford pilot program footprint. You'll see the text in red on the left-hand side of your screen points to a couple areas on the map, one being Garden Street and one being Main Street, just near Windsor Street. Those are the areas that we added to the expedited sewer separation. So those were the areas that really drove the schedule change and the additional properties being protected. Again, as this presentation gets done over and over time, you'll see projects go from gray to peach to orange. This slide is in this spot of the presentation due to the fact that the backwater valve program and the House Connect program are considered part of the North Hartford pilot program with regards to state grant funding. When doing this presentation to the public, the whole point of this slide is really to go through and educate them as to how to participate in the program, what the benefits of the program are, and if they're not knowledgeable about it, given background information of what those two programs are, being the backwater valve program and the house connection program. Now, outside of Hartford, within Hartford, but outside of North Hartford, we do have other consent order projects, and that's the point of this slide. This is all sewer rehabilitation work. Of note, the N31 is a small little project, but that does provide consent order compliance at that CSO. In similar fashion, we have consent order projects outside of Hartford. One of the, I would say, small victories that we were able to achieve early on in the integrated planning process is that DEEP acknowledged that II work outside of Hartford does have a CSO benefit, albeit not the same as sewer separation work, but we do show a CSO reduction when these projects actually go forward. And one with that CSO reduction does equate to grant loan funding, so which is a huge benefit for the district. The slide that's on the screen right now, the drainage study, we've talked about numerous times before. Basically, the point of this is to give an update on the drainage study. It's a joint project between us and the city. Its main two purposes are to identify where the city of Hartford flood control system needs to be needs improvement to facilitate current stormwater that's getting into its assets, and then secondarily lay out the sewer separation preliminary design plan, so that way we can then go ahead and proceed with sewer separation work upstream of CSOs N2 and N4 to achieve elimination of those two CSOs. Sorry, I didn't mean to do that. The next two slides are key performance indicators, again, straight out of the consent order. So these are items that the consent order dictated that we provide an update on. It's basically the progress of work, whether it be sewer II work such as lateral rehab work or sewer replacement work, or drainage work, which would be really a metric for sewer separation work, all the way down to how many private property internal disconnects have we done. For the purpose of the presentation, we actually break it out to district-wide and North Hartford, just to show progress from both metrics. Over time, these numbers will increase a lot as construction projects ramp up. And this is the North Hartford piece. The next two slides are also straight out of the consent order. One of the focus points being CSO reduction in the consent order. So as projects are considered complete, we will then use our sewer model to determine, which is cross-checked against actual CSO data, but to determine how we are performing with regards to CSO reduction, whether it be a one-year storm, a typical year, or elimination, which is the N2, N4 piece. So over time, as projects are complete, you'll see these bars kind of fill up and get closer to the overall goal. This is the same thing, except this is for the Gully Brook and North Meadows portions of North Hartford. With that, I'll turn it over to Jeff to briefly go through.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Jeff King, construction manager working on contract compliance and diversity. So these slides talk about all the efforts that were put into, soliciting contractors, training contractors, and advertising the work opportunities that were out there based on all the work that the engineers did. So this this slide talks about what Kelly Shane's department did in having functions set up where we could invite contractors who needed to renew their Connecticut DAS certifications for their SBE, MBE, WB, or DBE status. We also we assisted them in getting their recertifications And we also educated these contractors on the new SAM.gov ID process. So with the SAM.gov ID process, that basically gave every contractor a new number that would replace their federal EIN number. So it's a security function in the system now. So that's brand new. So we help contractors navigate that. We also, in order to hit our 30% goal for Hartford residents, we had to solicit contractors. So we used the City of Hartford's contractors list, as well as searches from the DAS vendors list and internet searches to locate contractors and bring them in for training. So so the next piece of this flyer is also the advertising that we did for the RFQs that went out for soliciting bids for the backwater valve and house connection program. So our communications department, Nick Slemmy and Julie McLaughlin, they advertised these RFQs in these 4 local newspapers. The next slide talks about all of the networking we had to do. So in order to, in order to get the proper bidding that we needed, we had to then do a lot of networking, and these are the functions that we attended in Q4. So we attended the CCIA annual dinner, we attended the Minority Construction Council members meetings, we attended the Greater Hartford African American Alliance weekly meetings to update the community on the RFQs that were out to bid and the requirements needed to submit a proposal. We also attended the University of Hartford internship event, and that was more structured around finding Hartford residents that were qualified to be employed by the contractors doing the work. We also teamed up with Connecticut Pre-Apprenticeship and Sherry Pratt at DOT, and we held a mini job fair at the Hartford Public High School, and we had our contractors buy in and also attend so they could advertise to students what kind of work they were doing to pique interest in employment. So we had Bovair, VMS, and BLD as contractors that attended those functions. So as Scott says, we did a lot of seed planting in Q3, and in Q4 we started to see all of those seeds that were planted ended up transforming our recruitment efforts for local labor into a workforce development program. These are just more events that we attended to meet contractors, do matchmaking so that the bigger contractors, the primes, could match up with the subcontractors to do all the work. So we attended the Minority Construction Council Construction Expo in Bloomfield on the October 9th. We were actually recognized for our efforts in advancing the cause of minority contractors. We met a contractor at this event, FAD Mechanical, who was a Hartford-based MBE, who attended our pre-bid and submitted a proposal. So like I said, a lot of these efforts that we did as far as networking turned into a workforce development program. And then you'll see in Q1, we'll show you, basically the fruits of the labor. But, these are the next few events that we attended, which was the CCIA CTEC Work-Based Learning Seminar. So that event was put on by CCIA with Don Schubert, and that was giving us an education lesson on how we could tap into the technical schools to find students that could get potential employment. Through that process, we also, Jamie Harlow and HR developed a new work-based learning brochure that we passed out to students. And through all these efforts, we ended up coming up with an event that's happening in Q1, which is the Tri-Trade event. That's going to be a partnership with Jeff Cathcart from the Connecticut Pre-Apprenticeship program and Sherry Pratt from DOT. And we're going to have local unions and various construction activities, stages that the students can get training on, and develop their skills for the whole week of April vacation. And so this slide talks mostly about the metrics now. So with all of the soliciting of contractors and all of the networking and seed plantings that happened in Q4, these would be the metrics that we would review, which is hitting our 30% Hartford resident workforce goal, the matchmaking that happened and what ensued after that matchmaking, which was hiring of one Hartford resident, and we have about 7 Hartford residents who need to do a little bit more as far as getting their OSHA, maybe work on their resumes, but we're working with those individuals so that if any job opportunities open up, we can bridge those gaps. And like I said, we've developed stronger relationships with the technical schools so that we can utilize the work-based learning program and mesh those with events that we're going to have moving forward. You'll see in Q1 that we've gone further than just the technical schools that are local and the Hartford Public High Schools. So we can keep you posted on that, as well as the various outreach presentations we did at schools and the construction site visits with students that we talked to. And this is mostly revamping the Learn and Earn program that happened last summer and how we transitioned that into a tri-trade event. And so this slide is basically just the metrics. And so this slide gives us an update on Q4, where we are with the hours. So we have a total of 4,000 hours worked by Hartford residents, which is a 31% participation rate. And to date, we are actually at 32% with 5,600 hours worked by Hartford residents. So I think we're doing pretty good. And the last slide talks about our WMBE participation and where we are as far as hitting our goals. We're exceeding the MBE. The WBE, we're creeping up on that goal. The reason why these numbers are off a little bit is because of the sequencing of construction events. For example, there could be landscaping that needs to get done at the end of the projects, and that would be through a WBE, which would push our percentages up to hit our goals. So I'll pass the next set of slides. I'm sorry. I'll pass the next set of slides back to Jason so he can finish the presentation. Thanks, Joe.
Jason, if I may, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Before you get started, Jeff was selected out of 140 candidates to be, he was nominated through the AWWA program, and he has been selected to go to the Transformative Academy of Learning.
Yeah, Transformative Water Leadership Academy.
So out of 140 candidates, he was selected because of all the hard work he's doing here. He's been recognized across the country in terms of all, we as he just said, we committed in July to impose something we've never done before, which is we would hire 30% of the workforce would be Hartford residents. And as Jeff just identified, we actually are 32%. We've never done that before. It's not required. It's not required by DEEP. It's not required by our charter. But we actually have achieved that. And Jeff had a huge part in that. So thank you, Jeff. You're doing a great job.
Thanks, Scott.
All right, only a couple slides left. One of the main things that we also committed to when we started off moving projects around was that we were not going to go above the Clean Water Project charge that was basically presented and established in September 2022. So to do so, two things had to happen. One was additional funding had to be received from the state, which we did achieve. And secondly, we had to defer some projects, which the state also acknowledged and memorialized with a modified consent order in the middle of this year. So you'll see on this graph, the dashed line is essentially what we projected in September 2022 when the integrated plan was approved by DEEP, and then the blue line is where we are projecting right now.
And Jay, again, this doesn't reflect the fact that the board chose in July to give every one of our customers a free sewer lateral. That's built into this model. So we deferred $300 million worth of work, and we deferred the tunnel, the future downtown tunnel, and we're staying within the rate structure, and everyone in the district's getting a free sewer lateral.
Thank you. And this is just a list of the projects that were deferred. So the date on the left is what they were listed at prior to this change, and the date on the right is our current estimate of where they will be. That date will be finalized when we do our next long-term control plan update, and, which is due in 2028. And then the final slide is really our opportunity to give closing remarks to the public, give them an opportunity to find out how to be informed. There's a hyperlink on here because this is obviously something that's posted on the website. The meetings have already been established for what months they're going to be in. This presentation was a presentation of Q4 of 2023 as well as the annual 2023. However, the program started mid-year 2023, so the annual is really just 2 quarters in this case. When we have our June meeting, that'll be Q1 of 2024. And then in one of the comments that we did get from the ICA last time was to include some definitions and acronyms. So at the back half of this presentation is some acronyms that gets used over the course of the presentation, what they mean, as well as some common terms and definitions that we may refer to either on a slide or while talking. And then finally, this was another consent order requirement. They wanted to have all in one location, somewhere to click on a website giving updates of information. So we have been maintaining project by project updates, and that's where this information is going to land. And that's the presentation in probably less than 10 minutes, hopefully.
Thank you. So, to the committee, we're being pressed for time, number one. Number two, this item, number 8, does not require us to take any action. And I would just suggest that if commissioners at this point have questions, that they submit those questions or call in to the staff or to Scott prior to the presentation on March 14th, rather than take the time now. So I apologize for not having that much discussion, but we do need to move on to item number 9. And we are expected to take action on item 9. Not necessarily? Yeah. Very good. Are you? You're excusing everybody. That's great. So we do need to at least acknowledge that number 9 is on our agenda. And I don't know who wants to address that. If you do, Scott, that's fine.
I'm happy to, Scott Jellison. I know this issue was raised actually by Commissioner Bush a couple of months ago, maybe longer. And as you know, that the free sewer lateral program was approved on July 12th, 2023. And we did receive public comments, and it was regarding this specific property. And I apologize, I don't have the property address. John, do you?
It's Miss Bryden's property. It's on Sunny Reach Road.
Yeah, I apologize. So the basic, and we brought this to the attention of the board at the time. When the board approved, everyone gets a free lateral. We had some stipulations in it, up to $10,000, and there's a few other stipulations. But basically, if the lateral needs to be replaced or it collapses, we just did this recently, last week, or this week, I think, that we would, the board has authorized us through ordinance that we would give everyone a free lateral, and that's how we paid for it, was pushing the $300 million to the Clean Water Project off the rate chart till like 2060. So the question here is, how far back do you want to go? And in July, we talked about that. Moving forward is the ordinance. Going backwards has a consequence. And depending on how far back you go determines how much money it would cost the MDC. So at the time we had said, it could be anywhere up to, $3.5 million if you go, how far you go back to, for someone who has done something just before we passed the ordinance. And at the time, the decision was not to go back, just to go forward. So there, I think the request is, this property had, typically, most homes have their sewer lateral go from their home right to the, in front of their street, and they connect. There's a lot of circumstances like this home where there was no sewer in front of their home, and they had, when the home was built, the sewer was built across other properties to get to a sewer pipe, and there were easements that were imposed as part of the development. And in this case, there was a $12,000 repair of this sewer lateral serving a home, but it was not within the easement area behind someone else's home. So the request is to grant, you know, I don't know if the request is to go back for everyone or just for this property, back to a certain date, which they would be, they would qualify for the free sewer lateral program. So it is, like I said, it depends on where you, how far you go back. You know, it could be upwards of $3.5 million. You know, if you go back from to 2018, it could be $3.5 million. So that's the question. Do we give, grant this request that we reimburse this property the up to $10,000? The program was specific to replacing the lateral, not fixing the lateral, right? Not a point repair. This is in a sense a point repair. This is a very long lateral. Chris, how far long is this lateral? Do we know?
It's good. 30 some odd feet, I believe, and I believe 20 some odd feet were replaced.
Yeah.
Repair. So yeah, it wasn't the full extent of the.
Yeah, but it's a very, it goes behind a couple of properties. So that's the question for the water BPW is, do we go backwards and grandfather either this property or others, and how much and how far back do we go? And that's the question.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Commissioner Patel.
I think before you do anything, you need to check out our maps. Because somebody called me in West Hartford, and maps are not accurate, and you know what West Hartford did for years before, when before they became member of MDC. So their maps are not clear. If you don't clear it and you set some date, you will be going back and forth. So I think examine all our rights of way, how the other connections are made, because many connections, as you mentioned, are made later on. People don't know even line exists. And what they thought, and they built over that garages, etc., with different strut, and now they want to go back and do the permanent structure there, and they are finding it difficult. So let's make sure that all our those type of conflicts are resolved before you make up any decision on dates or anything.
Commissioner Chair Curry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For you, I would suggest that the agenda tonight, a discussion of consideration for reimbursement, has nothing to do with the woman who spoke tonight and her concerns. I think the first step should be to determine if the board wants to afford reimbursements, and then, if so, how far back, and if this individual who spoke tonight falls within those parameters, and because her issue is such an anomaly that it may not fall within the guidelines that the board initially approves, but may have to be considered as a separate issue. I think first we need to discuss and consider whether we even want to recommend going back, and then if so, how far.
Commissioner Bush.
I just, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to say that, Scott, you'd mentioned going back all the way to 2018, which is a pretty far look back. and you mentioned that that cost would be $3.5 million, but it would only be just slightly over 1% of the entire budget allocated for this type of work. So it's an exceptionally small sum if you went back 6 years or so, 5 years. Certainly, this person's not asking for that type of look back. And then to follow up with an actual question is, over the course of the next period of time, however long that may be, do we anticipate actually spending all $300 million on the sewer laterals? How much would it be? What is the anticipated failure rate of the laterals, and how long is it going to take us to spend that type of money?
If I may, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, please.
So if you look, the chart that Jay had shown, which was the rate structure for the clean water surcharge, when we did the model, we assumed certain things, because obviously we had a very short time to do this negotiation with DEEP. And I'm going to guess at the numbers, but correct me if I'm wrong, staff. We initially said we were going to do, as part of that rate structure, we were going to do $2 million worth, not 300. It's not just for laterals. It was the way it was part and way which we paid for the laterals. So the rate structure shows we were planning on 2 million, 3 million, 4, then 5, then 7. Correct? Yes. So that was our schedule, and the reason why we said 2 up front was because we know we're busy. We're so busy in North Hartford, we don't have time to do anything else. Maybe some onesie twosies elsewhere in the district, but we're so busy in North Hartford that we said it's going to grow over time. So that amount of money that we're planning to spend over the next 5 years is built into that rate structure, and it's 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, I think are the numbers. So it's not the whole 300 million, I'm sorry. The reason why we went back 6 years was because a lot of times in our water bill disputes about, you owe us money and we didn't know you, and we go back 6 years because that's PURAs, and we're trying to follow. We just try to give the board some options. Like if you went back 6 years, it'd be 3.5. You're right. If we go back less, it'd be less. But we had about 1,200 inspections by our staff of inspecting a new lateral to a home. We don't know, is that 1,200 a full replacement that complies with the ordinance, or is it a point repair? But we'd have to dig deeper into that, right? But the ordinance is replacement of lateral, not point repair of a lateral. But if that 3.5 million is assuming of those 1,200, only 50% were full replacement. If they were all 100% of them, 1,200 since 2018, were full replacements, it would be 7 million. So we just try to give some options to the board. But to the chairman's point, we have to decide, what would you like us to look at, and how far do you want us to go back?
And just as a point, how long before this was passed was the failure on Sunny Reach?
The letter, good question. I've got that right here. May 30th. Is it May 30th?
It was January 2023.
Oh, sorry, January 2023. Yeah, January 1st.
23 would be.
I'm sorry, is it?
It happened in January 2023.
Okay, January 2023. And we approved this in July of 2023.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you just said.
So the collapse was in January of 2023?
Yeah.
And the board approved the ordinance in July of 2023.
Okay.
So roughly 6 months.
Commissioner Torres.
Yes, my question is for you, Mr. Chairman. Was there I guess you would answer this, Scott, was the assumption that the water reimbursement would be, I'm asking because that's what I think it is, but I may be wrong, from the property to the front sewer pipe? Was that the assumption that was made when this was discussed in terms of, paying for that or replacement of those repairs?
Scott Jellison?
Yes.
So the ordinance, the anticipation for the ordinance was we would replace a collapsed lateral, the entire length from the home or business to the property line. We're responsible, MDC is responsible to replace the portion from the property line to the main anyways. We would always do that. So, and then but there was a caveat that it would be only up to $10,000.
Right, that was.
So it's immaterial to the, to the distance. Digging in the backyard is probably less expensive than ripping up sidewalks and fences and stuff. So you might get more per lineal foot with something in the backyard, but there was a limit to it of $10,000.
Yeah, and the follow-up question to that, if I may, is then what kind of precedent would this set for other similar properties that now we find that these things were being done at some point in time because there was no place, no piping in front of the homes to be able to connect these laterals. This could potentially be an issue that across many municipalities where this has occurred. Would this establish some kind of precedent that we would have to deal with?
Well, it's not so much the precedent of crossing properties, it's the precedent of time. Moving the basically the effective date of the ordinance from July of 2023 to some date prior. And how far back do you go? And if you go back to January 1, 2023, there's going to be someone from December 1st of 2022 that had a problem. And so that's what
I'm getting at, that where does it stop? Right. Because time is money.
Right.
And so to a large extent, the MDC begins to correct structural engineering problems that would never occur today because that's not the way we operate. And that's my question, that at what point do we continue then to correct other problems that were never our problems in the first place?
And if I may, Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
just a really important, I have, whatever the board so chooses to do and how far you want to go back, but just remember something. The rate chart that we showed, that was approved by approved by the board, so that we stay under the clean water rate structure that we presented to DEEP and to this board in September of 2022. We only expected to spend $2, $3, $4, $5, and $7 million. If you went back to 2018 and it was 3.5 or some number, that wasn't contemplated in the rate structure. So we don't want to put ourselves in a position by going backwards. We have to raise the rate of the clean water surcharge next year because we didn't contemplate these beyond July 12th to 2023. But it can be done.
Commissioner Wolf.
Yeah, so I had someone reach out to me that went through, they had a voluntary sewer lien placed on their bill, and they got the replacement through the sewer lateral installation program in February of 2023. So there's another person that's reached out about this, and that's great that there are people reaching out to us and helping us understand that. And I imagine that there are others reaching out to other commissioners, but if we change the date, how are we finding out about folks? How are we reaching out to those folks who may potentially be, impacted by looking back? How do we manage that from a staffing standpoint?
I mean, Mr. Chairman.
Please.
Scott Jellison. So we know by permitting process, right? Permitting process, we've inspected, we've approved permits of 1,169 since 2018. So if the board was so to choose and say, we want to go back to some date, whatever date is, we have the documentation that somebody called utility services and said, we need an inspection because we're going to replace our lateral. So we have the documentation. What we don't have is if someone replaced their lateral and didn't call us, right? Our position was in July, when the ordinance was approved, we wouldn't even consider those because we wouldn't even know if it was installed correctly. So it had to have been permitted by us, inspected by us. And so we have the documentation of who we actually inspected of that 1,169.
Okay. So,
And then,
go ahead.
just one last question.
Yes, please.
If we are to make a change, just from a process standpoint, BPW comes up with the idea and then goes to government, then to finance, then to the board. Is that what we're looking at?
Well, it's going to be an amendment to an ordinance, right? Because you're changing the effective date. So it'd have to go to government, Chris Stone, District Council. It'd have to go to government at the next stop. If you decide to propose a change, then it would go to the full board.
Okay.
The money's already been allocated. It'll just be redistributed to include others besides, but.
Okay. Thank you, Clayton.
All set?
Yeah.
Thank you. Commissioner Bush, quickly, and then I want to go to Chairman Curry. Go ahead.
Okay, just a quick, do we have actually a list of people who are asking for money currently? Or, I mean, this would be, I assume, a voluntary rebate to the 1,169 people since 2018. Should we decide to go back that far, this would be money that they weren't expecting to get. So I don't want to stop anyone from being fairly compensated, but I think that people who are asking certainly would, might be at the top of the list to figure out a date. Just one quick thing. I just wanted to quickly reply to Commissioner's comments regarding setting a precedent. These things are covered now. So we're only setting a precedent going backwards, not going forwards. So all of these issues that would come up from today forward would be covered under the current ordinance, correct?
If I may, Scott Jelson.
Go ahead.
Well, the precedent is, for this specific case, is, and it's up to the board, BPW and the board to decide, but the ordinance was written to replace a lateral up to 10,000. This case is a point repair on, not a replacement of the lateral. So I would defer to Chris on that.
Can you just define for me the difference between a lateral replacement and a point repair, just so everybody knows exactly what that is?
Yeah, yes, so the intent of the ordinance, and I'll leave it to Chris or John to explain what the ordinance actually says, but the intent of the ordinance was, if you have a lateral house connection, is the correct term, from your home or business to the street, we would replace that up to $10,000, right? In this case, and this is not the only home, this is very common in developments where there were sewers on one street but not sewers on the other street, so sewers went cross-country to get to the sewer. This was a replacement, a point repair, which is approximately, I think Chris said 30 feet of this long lateral. So it's semantics, but I just to clarify what the ordinance says and the intent of it, you could have, setting precedent to your question, you could have a situation where people are asking for us to pay for point repairs, 2-foot sections or what have you. So that's my concern.
Why is that a bad thing to do a point repair if it saves money? Or is there something I'm missing out on the difference? In this particular situation, that lateral was I think over 100 feet long from the time it left the back of the building. It went all the way through the back of the property, crossed outside the person's property, across an easement to the main line, which was in the backyard. And I think part of that pipe that was replaced was actually not on this person's property. So a point repair was the appropriate repair versus replacing 100 feet.
Commissioner, I don't disagree with you, but my only point is the intent of our ordinance was to put a brand new lateral from the home to the street for under 10,000. But if we don't want to do point repairs, right? Because if Mrs. Jones has a 20-foot lateral from her home or business to the street, we don't want to go there 4 times and point repair it we want to replace it under the ordinance so that that homeowner doesn't have any more problems. I don't disagree with you. 30 feet's 30 feet, right? 10,000 is 10,000. That's up to the board and BPW to decide.
Thank you.
Yeah, so, before I call on Chairman Curry, I'm only calling on Chairman Curry just to comment on what I'm about to say. And that is that this subject seems to be not thoroughly developed. And I would suggest that we need much more discussion. And unless the chairman has a particular different approach to express, by all means, I defer to the chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would only suggest, and I agree with your conclusions, I would suggest that we ask Scott Jellison to provide us with some numbers going back 6 months, 1 year, 18 months, 24 months. So at least we have an idea of what it'll cost us going back. And that's based on those who have applied for permits.
Very good, and thank you for that. And Commissioner DeVella.
I move we table this to the next meeting.
Second.
Thank you. And do we need to take a,
So we can get more information in the interim.
yes, do we need to take a formal vote, or we just,
Well, you do, yeah.
okay, all in favor of tabling this?
Aye.
Any objection?
Aye.
All right, as I said before, we're in a time crunch, and we have still one more topic, but I'm going to ask the commissioner who brought this to my attention, and that's number 10. I'm sorry, did I say 10? Yes, 10. Commissioner Adel, who brought this to my attention, and I don't know if you're willing to table this as well forward. And we can do that, and then we can get to the last opportunity for public comment on today's meeting, because we do need to adjourn relatively quickly. So, public comments. Any public comments? Seeing none, hearing none, there's an item suggesting future topics for discussion for the Bureau of Public Works. We will take that under advisement, and if anyone has another suggestion, by all means, bring it forward. Otherwise, I suggest that we move to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Wonderful.